This all comes from Biden and the White House, by the way. And they have their top people here. Because when he can't put two sentences together, he's the worst president in the history of our country. Can't speak, can't walk off a helicopter, can't walk off a plane, can't walk off a stage. And the only way they think they can win is if they can do something with Trump. Because we have an incompetent, the worst president in the history of the United States of America.
Yes, President Trump arriving at court this morning where the crooked, convicted liar, lawyer, fixer Michael Cohen will be testifying under oath today, as though that makes any difference. Under oath? Oath schmoth, as he's famous for saying. Wait, he's a lawyer, he's famous for saying oath schmoth? Yeah, sure, why not? They all find themselves under oath from time to time, and they all lie. You know, directors of national intelligence and generals and cabinet secretaries, congressional hearings, court cases. Come on. Womp, womp, womp. Were there any self-immolations over the weekend, Michael? Not that I saw. You know, we had this Aurora Borealis event over the weekend, and would have been really cool if we had been someplace other than Washington, D.C. My cousin Susie in Ohio sent me pictures of incredible Aurora Borealis out her window of her condo complex in Ohio. Amazing stuff. People all over the country were getting great views of the Aurora Borealis, and we would have been able, in theory, to see it in Washington, D.C. and surrounding environs had we not had the cloud cover that we had, but we had very significant cloud cover. Friday evening, Friday night, I was checking, and no good. We were getting a lot of rain and we even had some thunder and lightning over the weekend, which I always love. But we did not get the Aurora Borealis, the northern lights, as hoped. And that was happening because of solar flare activity on our sun. Our sun was busy, and there are photographs, thanks to the patriarchy. We knew all about it before it even happened. We knew that it was coming because of the patriarchy. You're welcome. And the solar flare activity is identified. Here's the location, some black spots. These solar flares are leaping hundreds of thousands of miles off the surface of the sun. They come in our direction. There was danger that GPS would be knocked out, satellite communications, even cellular telephones on ground level would be knocked out because of the way it bounces from tower to tower. And they said there was danger people would have electricity outages, which is, electricity provided to you by the patriarchy, cell phone connectivity, satellites provided to you by the patriarchy. Thank me later. And they said the solar flare activity could knock all that out. And because the patriarchy is so amazing and so ingenious, they actually could warn ahead of time and tell you what time it was going to happen, and then tell you, oh yeah, but there could be some good news. You could see the Aurora Borealis if you don't have a lot of clouds. We had a lot of clouds here, and that was kind of a bummer, I've got to say. But a lot of people saw it. I think people were seeing it as far south as Florida. Isn't that right? The Aurora Borealis. Never seen. Going back to Iceland next year, my best girl and I, and hopefully we'll get the Aurora when we're taking our time in Iceland next year. We've been there before, Iceland, but we were not lucky enough to get the Aurora while we were in Iceland last time. So we're hoping we'll be able to get to the Aurora next time. Yeah, bummer. But a lot of people saw it. I had friends send pictures from my cousin Susie from Ohio, but others as well from places where you don't normally see the Aurora Borealis. See what I'm saying? I'm telling you. Also, there's a bit of a rift between Ilhan Omar and Congressman Don Bacon. And we figured out this morning what it is. she's a Muslim woman, and his name is Bacon. She just doesn't like bacon. He's not halal. He's not halal at all. So naturally, Ilhan Omar is not going to like Don Bacon because she doesn't like any bacon. Am I right? Yeah, I think I'm right about that. That's probably the explanation. All right, and with that, let's go to a little bit of audio here because Ilhan Omar. What's her most famous line, do you think? What's her most famous line? I think we probably know what her most famous. She's talking about the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, and she was asked about it, and she explained it thusly.
Some people did something?
See, some people did something. That was her explanation for September 11th. What happened? She should be a college professor, and she probably will be when she leaves Congress, or a college president. And that will be the School of Jihad. No more School of Rock, just the School of Jihad. But representative, Democrat, left-wing, radical, extremist, anti-Semite, racist, anti-American, mainstream Democrat Ilhan Omar had this kind of remarkable line last week, and we played it for you last week, where she suggested that students on campuses across America that are Jewish are, well, some of them at least, are genocidal because, never mind cutting the number of terrorists killed in Gaza in half, never mind that. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar last week.
We should not have to tolerate anti-Semitism or bigotry for all Jewish students, whether they are pro-genocide or anti-genocide.
Yeah, whether they're pro-genocide or whether they're anti-genocide. Because a lot of them, are pro-genocide. Because the poor, innocent Hamas terrorists are getting the snot kicked out of them by a far superior culture and a far superior military. And so, they should just sit down and take it. And when Hamas shows up and butchers 1,200 people and scatters their bodies all over the country, and kidnaps hundreds more and rapes them to death and murders them and keeps them in underground tunnel systems paid for by idiots like us and the so-called United Nations. So that's what she said. Well, Congressman Don Bacon was asked about this because, why not? And Don Bacon, whose name is Bacon, that is worthy of note in this context, I think, very much. But Congressman Don Bacon was asked about Ilhan Omar's craziness and remarkable stuff. He's a Nebraska Republican, Don Bacon, and he is not halal.
No Jewish American student should be called pro-genocide. It's just wrong.
It's just wrong. Shouldn't be called pro-genocide because it's just wrong. Now, his language is not too harsh. I think maybe I would have used some more direct language when it comes to Ilhan Omar. But, the Democrat Party, they're really, what's the best phrasing for this? Oh, yeah, they're not on our side. You see, they're not on the side of the United States of America or Western civilization, for that matter, because the left is, they're just not good at all. Comes to being on our side. Antony Blinken is our Secretary of State. And here's a funny thing. He's got like a $10 million house just across from the Potomac River in Virginia, not in D.C., but in Virginia. And there is an encampment in front of his house of pro-terrorist Democrats who dress up like jihadis, and they've got Palestinian Hamas flags, and they're living in tents along a roadside where some of them could accidentally be run over by a truck if the truck just veered off a little while texting or something, because they're right along the edge of the road. It's over by the Saudi ambassador's residence, which is probably a $70 million estate, the Saudi ambassador's residence, and Blinken's right across the street. They all get rich off of this stuff. Somehow all the Democrats get rich off of government, and they're in and out of government at motorcades and armored limos and government airplanes and 10, I'm going to say his house probably a $10 million house. And Antony Blinken was on Face the Nation. He's got these crazies encamped in front of his house right now. And they've been there for a long time, for months probably now. And Antony Blinken was on Face the Nation on CBS yesterday talking about those pesky Jews and how we've got to keep weapons out of their hands because somebody might get hurt. Of course, the people that might get hurt are genocidal lunatics of a radical Islamic terrorist army called Hamas, funded by Iran, both of which are funded by the Democrat Party. From Barack Obama to Joe Biden to the Democrats on Capitol Hill that can't wait to give billions of dollars to the terrorists that would impale your children on pikes and dance around the blood feast. Now, Antony Blinken on Face the Nation, when weapons and people could get hurt because there's a war on and everything. And what about the women and the children? And they never brought up the UN cutting the number in half on Face the Nation. But
when it comes to the use of weapons, concerns about incidents where, given the totality of the damage that's been done to children, women, men, it was reasonable to assess that in certain instances, Israel acted in ways that are not consistent with international humanitarian law.
Not consistent with international humanitarian. So they're human rights violators because they're going after a terror group, and the terror group surrounds themselves with their own stinking, sacrificable families in the hope that they'll get killed. I played audio for you last week of an IDF soldier calling a Palestinian man, so-called, in his home and saying, get out of there. We're about to bomb the bank across the street. And he said, no, we're going to stay here because my children will be martyrs, and then we'll show how bad you are, because they're a suicidal, homicidal, genocidal death cult. They should really just engage in self-immolation, mass self-immolation. We should, Joe Biden's building them a port facility and a big pier. We should deliver gasoline and Zippo lighters, I think. Gasoline and Zippo lighters. So wait a minute, it's Israel. It's reasonable to assess that Israel is the one breaking the law here. That's what our Secretary of State said. And the fake reporter on CBS just sat there nodding in agreement because, it's Democrat land. And that's okay. And wait a minute, they broke the law. They're the most scrupulous country in the world when it comes to defending themselves against terrorist armies. Going to great lie. Again, I played audio last week of IDF calling, saying, get out of there. We're about to drop a bomb in this facility because it's a Hamas headquarters. And the suicidal lunatic said, no, we're going to stay and he said, we love death more than you love life. Or words very much to that effect, which is the old Al-Qaeda. I use it to describe the Democrats. And it's the old Al-Qaeda phrase, we love death more than you love life. So wait a minute, it's the Israelis. Blinken reports say it's impossible to verify, and this is great because this is what is really going on. Our own State Department said in a report that they're not really making public that there is no evidence that Israel has broken any law. Axios, Blinken report says it's impossible to verify Israel broke weapons law in Gaza. Really, it's impossible to verify? Don't we have Washington chefs and all kinds of monitors in there looking at all this stuff? But then he accuses Israel of being the lawbreakers here. Now, and he didn't quickly add in the same breath, of course, everything Hamas does is a war crime, and they're terrorists, and they butchered 1,200 people. They're still holding hostages, including American hostages, and they must release the hostages. None of that. Just pesky Jews. Then he went back to his $10 million house. Speaking of Democrats, here's a sobering headline. New estimates are that more than 1 million babies were killed by abortion in the United States in 2023. That's last year, the highest number of abortions since 2012, more than a decade. But wait, Roe versus Wade was repealed. I thought those nasty Republicans outlawed everything everywhere, but we've had the most abortions in more than 10 years since Roe v. Wade was overturned. I guess everything they say is a lie. You know, we've got to fight back against this evil. When they shout abortion, we shout life. But how do we do that? Well, we join hands with Preborn. Preborn is one of the nation's largest organizations that sponsors ultrasounds for clinics in the highest abortion areas. When a mother is considering an abortion and she sees her baby on an ultrasound, hears her heartbeat, sees the heartbeat, it pretty much doubles the baby's chance of living a long and happy life, growing old in America, hopefully free. Every day, Preborn helps rescue 200 unborn baby lives. Every day. Count that by 365 days. Now, honestly, which is truly miraculous, great numbers, but by the time I finish this ad, 2 unborn babies will have been taken by abortion. $28 could be the difference between life and death, quite literally in this case. Please join the fight by sponsoring 1, 2, 3, or if you can, 200 ultrasounds. All the gifts are tax deductible. To donate, all you have to do is dial pound 250 and then say the word baby when you're prompted to do that. That's pound 250 and the keyword is baby, or visit preborn.com/plant. That's me. That's preborn.com/PLANTE. Yes, sir. Yeah, so our Secretary of State is out there indicting Israel. Joe Biden is withholding munitions and withholding intelligence that they say is valuable to Israel, but they're not on the side of our allies because they're not on our side. I love this one, too. Let's go to number 5, soundbite number 5. This is our alleged national security advisor, the anemic Jake Sullivan. And listen how he refers to Hamas as folks. Folks, like they're your neighbor down the street.
Because there's 1 million people there in very close quarters who've been pushed there because of the military operations in other parts of Gaza, you would have really significant civilian casualties. And while Israel would also be able to kill some Hamas folks, many Hamas folks would melt away because they're terrorists. They're not really organized fighters in the way that we think about a typical military.
Yeah, they're just folks. They're just, it's like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hamas. They're just folks. And there are a lot of people there. There would be civilian casualties. The Hamas people design it that way. They want the maximum number of civilian casualties. Maybe you should mention that.
Some people did something.
It was reasonable to assess that in certain instances, Israel acted in ways that are not consistent with international humanitarian law.
International humanitarian law. That's right. It's reasonable to assess that Israel acted in ways that are... How about Hamas? Have they ever acted in ways that are consistent with humanitarian law? Are they holding hostages that they're torturing and raping every day, you fatuous little fop? And then Jake Sullivan, our so-called national security advisor, is, well, these folks, poor folks are trapped where they live with the government that they voted into power that attacked the nation next door and butchered civilians and plans on wiping the country off the map. Senator Tom Cotton, on the other hand, is not one of these dim-witted rectal apertures that the Democrats call world leaders, and Senator Tom Cotton was having none of it.
It sounded like a bunch of Weasley, mealy-mouth politics. He said it's reasonable to assess. He said that like 3 or 4 times. It's like he was coached to say that as if it was some magic talisman to help them walk the political line they want between the pro-Hamas wing of their party and the vast pro-Israel majority of the American people. The report that they put out Friday night after news deadlines passed was very clear. There is no evidence that Israel is violating international law. All civilian casualties in Gaza are solely the responsibility of Hamas. In fact, Israel is probably doing more than any military in history to avoid civilian casualties.
That's the obvious fact, and everybody knows that, except for Antony Blinken and Joe Biden and the Democrats who are cowards and have no moral background, no moral backbone, rather, and it's or background. And honestly, yeah, the talisman, the magical powers that, Israel, international law. Yeah, is that right? Sure. Now let's go to the dimwits. This is hilarious. In Orlando, Florida, a gang of Democrats who are queers for Palestine. Queers, that is to say, they're queer for Palestine, and they're for Palestine, so they're queers for Palestine. I believe that means they're gay, although queer was verboten. That was one of those words that you couldn't use until they said, all right, well, now we're going to use it. It was like the N-word. And if you're a rapper, were it not for double standards, liberals would have no standards at all. So queers for Palestine effectively glued themselves to a highway in Orlando, Florida, and they blocked traffic. And I guess 3 of them were arrested, but that's not enough. They should have been steamrolled with huge, heavy construction equipment, I think. But Queers for Palestine block exit to Disney World, infuriating drivers before they are promptly arrested, because this isn't California, this is Florida. And they don't have a spineless jellyfish as a governor there. They have a Republican who understands the difference between this kind of lunacy and civilization itself, and some drivers got out, and they're one little idiots who couldn't even pick up a football, much less throw a football. Very unimpressive young people. And if they were in Gaza, which they're defending, they'd hang them before they finish their first bite of a shawarma. Honestly. Also, an angry dad bringing his family to Disney World got out of his car and said, you're losing people to your cause because of this. Think a little bit. You're causing people to actually hate you. All right? And then he said, GFY, but the long version of GFY, 45,000 people dead. He knows that's not true because they're yelling these fake numbers. They're yelling, and there are 3 young people and, 20-ish, early 20s, and they've got their Palestinian headdress stuff on, and they have no idea what it means. But this is what the Democrat Party has done to them. And these are people that would not be accepted into the military. Well, wait a minute, under Joe Biden, maybe they would be. But the Queers for Palestine shutting down the road.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
And people are just looking at them like, are you people very severely mentally impaired? And a lot of a certain amount of cursing going on, but they were arrested. Their reward should be a free trip to the Gaza, where they could chant Queers for Palestine and find out about Palestine. There is no Palestine. There are no Palestinian people. These are Arabs that live in Israel. They're the luckiest Arabs in that region of the world. Now, also at the Duke University, Duke still aspiring to be the Harvard of the South, and Duke University had invited Jerry Seinfeld to give the commencement address at Duke, and Jerry showed up, and honestly, I've got to be, you want to be fair, of course, to Duke University and the students there, because it's not like it was a huge protest. It was not. My best girl and I were watching it on Saturday, the news, not the commencement, but the news, and about 40-ish spoiled brat punks who think they're hipsters, and so they're pro-Hamas and anti-Israel, and about 40 or so walked out of the venue as Jerry Seinfeld was being introduced. He's Jewish, and he has expressed his support for Israel in the last couple of months. And that's led to protests at an event he had in New York with people threatening him on the sidewalks and walking out of an event he had and stuff. But a very small number. In fact, my friend Brian sent me a thing. John Fetterman tweeted out 30 out of 7,000 students walked out at Duke University. He says that's 0.0043%. 30 out of 7,000. That may or may not be a correct number. I guess thinking it off the top of my head, it could be a correct number. A very small percentage. And I'll give Duke credit that, and let me say the protesters weren't screaming and yelling. Some of the idiots had Palestinian headdress on and stuff, and they'd be hanged there too. But never mind that. And so it's a very small number. And even the idiots that walked out, apparently, once they left the venue, they were chanting something stupid, free Palestine or whatever they were chanting. But they didn't really disrupt much. They were Duke polite when it comes to their protest. They walked out as a protest in silence, basically, with their idiot. A couple of them had little flags, Palestinian flags, and their idiot Palestinian headdresses, the black and white headdresses, and they left. And then when they got outside, they apparently chanted some stupid chant. That they're all big on stupid chants, aren't they? Jerry Seinfeld, who is 70 years old, kind of hard to believe, being introduced while the dimwits are walking out.
Jerry is also serving as our commencement speaker today.
Jerry is also serving as our commencement speaker today. And the 7,000 people in the arena, graduates and family and so on. And
So what's the big deal about our commencement speaker?
now the students are walking out, and other students are booing them. It seemed pretty clear to me that they were booing the people that were walking out. Isn't that right? And so, Duke may be the Harvard of the South, but at least it's of the South. So it's not like everybody's a Jew-hating anti-Semite like at Harvard. But there were people, and it started kind of in the middle and then on either side in the different sections of the crowd. There were students getting up and walking out like they're doing something noble, you morons. Yeah, send them to the ghettos in Poland. Go back to where they're chanting at Harvard and the other Ivy Leagues. Go back to Poland. That's where Auschwitz was and still is. Honestly, not still operating, but give the left a chance. They'll reconstitute the Socialist Workers' Party of Adolf Hitler. And, pretty amazing stuff. And I like the fact that there were people booing and jeering the people that were walking out of the place. They weren't booing and jeering Jerry Seinfeld. So they're like, yeah, they're happy to have Jerry Seinfeld giving the commencement address, and people are chanting, Jerry, Jerry, Jerry. Senator John Fetterman, who's like the Frankenstein of the Senate with his hoodies and his boots. So why does the media habitually platform this fringe? Guaranteed coverage is the nicotine to the pup tent campus intifada, and Hamas salutes them all. Well, Hamas does salute them all. But the students walking out, and at Duke, why? What's the matter with you people, honestly? Then Jerry Seinfeld, who's a comedian, actually gave a commencement address, and it wasn't political. His humor is almost never political, and he's never been a political comedian, and he says it out loud. He's like, why would I do that? And aggravate half my audience with whatever politics I say. And he doesn't do dirty jokes. He doesn't curse. He doesn't do political jokes. He's a humorist and a comedian. And I've always liked him very much, and I've always liked the fact that he stayed out of politics. And they tried to drag him in. I mean, he stated something obvious about Israel versus a terrorist group called Hamas recently, and that's great. But Jerry Seinfeld at the commencement.
Again, a lot of you are thinking, I can't believe they invited this guy. Too late. I say, use your privilege. I grew up a Jewish boy from New York. That is a privilege if you want to be a comedian.
Jewish privilege.
Thanks.
Thanks. And he's just himself, and he's 70 years old. He looks great. He looks like he'd be in his 50s, and he's funny because he's a comedian. And they invited a comedian who's Jewish. So some of the little zombies that have been brainwashed by lefties, even at Duke, decided to protest because he's a Jew. And they really, headbands are the new armbands, but honestly, Jerry Seinfeld, just completely ridiculous that you would protest, walk out on Jerry Seinfeld. That just makes you an anti-Semite, and those people should be identified. They should be outed. They should be maybe doxxed, if you prefer the term doxxed. There was a nice young lady that graduated yesterday who is Jewish at Duke, and her name is Alana Paykar. Alana Paykar was on the Fox News channel early this morning. I was watching it for you.
What you're not seeing on the media is that after these students walk out, and by the way, it's only 40 students, they walked out. After they walked out, the entire stadium started booing them and eventually started chanting Jerry's name, clearly in support of him being our commencement speaker.
And that's really nice to see. And this is Duke and not Harvard, but perhaps, maybe, hopefully, the worm is turning on these psychopaths. Alana Paykar.
I'm actually very thankful to say that Duke University, unlike other universities, has been a much safer environment for Jewish students. I'm somebody who's very openly Jewish, very openly Zionist, and I'm able to proudly walk around campus. I wear my Jewish star necklace, and if there's anyone to be targeted, I feel like I would be one of the first students, and I can happily say that Duke has done everything in their power to ensure their safety for students. Unfortunately, we cannot say the same for universities across America.
Isn't it absolutely outrageous that in the United States of America, a student that is Jewish has to fear, has to be concerned? I played audio from universities up and down the East Coast and elsewhere where the Jews are being told by professors to hide their necklaces if it's a Jewish star or anything else identifiably Jewish, because you'd be in danger and this is all because of the Democratic Party. This is 100% on the Democrat Party. Now, let's go to the phones. We're going to get to Donald Trump in Wildwood, New Jersey over the weekend and all that implies, because there's a lot going on there and the giant crowd and the news media. And I got poll numbers and President Trump kicking butt in the polls, and the Democrats are freaking. But right now, let's go to the telephones. Let's go to Danielle. Let's go to Danielle calling from Yukon, Oklahoma. Danielle, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Very well. Haven't heard from you in forever.
It's been a minute, yeah. Been a lot going on in my life the last year or so.
Yeah.
It's, watching all this stuff going on in colleges. I have a junior. She's going to be a senior next year in high school. And I really just want to tell her, you know what? Just go to a trade school and avoid all the nonsense. I have a 20-year-old son who wants to go in the Army. We've got big military history in my family. And honestly, I don't know if I'm going to go in right now. It's just too much. It's too much nonsense. It used to be, you join to go fight the bad guy, win, and come home. And now it's all the social justice, whatever crap is going on. And the mission is not being fulfilled. And I don't want my son to put his neck on the line for nonsense. And I'm ready to just wrap my house in bubble wrap and have my food delivered to the house and just, kind of stay here with my husband and my kids. It's really irritating because this is not the image that America used to be. It used to be you get your degree, you get your white picket fence, you get, your stability, and it's just not there anymore. And I don't know what to tell my kids sometimes. And it's very, very frustrating.
Well, you're certainly not alone. You know that. Now, Danielle used to live around here in the greater Washington metropolitan area, and you moved out of here for all kinds of good reasons. And you've moved to Oklahoma, and you're trying to raise a normal family. And the intrusiveness of the crazy left-wing lunacy is inescapable, even in Yukon, Oklahoma.
In Yukon, Oklahoma, yeah.
And with your family's military history and military legacy, honestly, it brings to mind another story that I have today about the U.S. military having programs for veterans that exclude white veterans. Now, that wouldn't affect your family, but nevertheless, that they're excluding white veterans from all kinds of programs because they're only for BIPOC, for Black, Indigenous, people of color support groups and multiracial, biracial, but no white people need apply. This is Joe Biden's Department of Veterans Affairs with all kinds of...
You know what's crazy, Chris?
Tell me.
My brother-in-law, he was a Marine. He got out about 10 years ago now. My other brother-in-law, he's in the Air Force right now. They're both white. There's white as can be. And it's we all get together. Nobody talks about race. Nobody talks about it. We're just family.
Right.
And that's what I want my kids to, it's just family.
So I apologize. So you have veterans of all stripes in your family.
Yes, there is something I wanted to tell you real quick.
Yes.
Friday, Eric Sledgehammer, he passed away on Friday. And it's been a little over 10 years since me and him had met at the Free Speech Forum. And I wanted to call and ask if you could play Sledgehammer before your show ends today.
I love it, Danielle. Thank you. My best girl pointed out yesterday that you had posted. Eric Carey was a great friend of our show. Sledgehammer, a giant of a man, a great American, a great guy. And I learned of that over the weekend, Danielle. I'm glad you brought it up. Eric Carey, God bless, Godspeed. And we will play Sledgehammer for the sledge. He had a big tattoo down his forearm with the word Sledgehammer, and each letter was the size of a cigarette pack. A giant of a man and a gentle giant, and just a wonderful guy. Eric will be missed. Jen Psaki, NBC journalist, Biden White House spokesmodel. She's got a new book out. And there's a big lie in her book that she's been caught in.